Well, welcome everybody today. That was a great sizzle. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you all for being here. I'm always curious about our audience. And are some folks in the room today interested in advertising? Are some of you, raise your hands? Yeah, that's great. And producers, directors, a little both, just say out loud. Creative directors, writing, great. Okay, so you've got some fabulous experts here tonight. Great, so we're going to talk a little bit about brands taking stands. And as I'm sure we've all seen from the way that advertising has shifted in the last 10 years, there's a lot of deeper storytelling happening, a lot of value-based stuff going on, a lot of big mistakes. Remember Pepsi, so people are trying and sometimes making mistakes, but here are the kinds of people who can help you to not make those mistakes, hopefully. And we can talk a little bit about how that landscape is changing, and then learn about your careers and your paths. Great. Well, I usually like to start with just a quick intro, if you don't mind just each of you introducing yourself, and maybe just like a quick line, and I know it's hard to do this, but a quick line of what it is that you do inside of your company, what your role looks like. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm Tim Jones, Exec Strat Director of 72 and Sunny New York. You saw some of our work there earlier. So my role in that office is to help oversee the office overall, but specifically the strategic development of all of our clients' business. So that typically involves what's the business problem, who's the consumer, how we're going to solve it, and then I would typically do something like brief the creatives who will go and create the advertising you saw on the screen behind you. So that's my role within all of that.
Amanda Lehner. I'm a co-owner of Help Good, and we do marketing for nonprofits. I do a lot of business development and also just run the whole show here in New York, and I like to do strategy, so I still am very much involved with that. We're a smaller shop, so I kind of have my hands in everything. Not a micromanager.
Hi, I'm Leanne Towns. I'm Executive Vice President at Weber Shandwick, which is one of the large public relations and communications firms. I lead our New York practice, the social impact practice. So all of my work is solely dedicated to helping brands, helping companies, helping nonprofits figure out what their rightful role is, how they can use their scale, skill, and resources to address some of the largest social and environmental issues, and then apply that to engage their employee base, connect with their consumer, and ultimately make an impact on the world. So I'm involved in everything from the strategy to ideation to actual execution, and oversee a portfolio of brands. Every industry, every sector is represented within our portfolio.
Great. That's fantastic. So it seems like all of us here on this are on the other side, not on the brand side. We're the ones who are sort of working with the brands and helping the brands to come up with their strategies, their campaigns, their content. And we don't have to go down a line. Feel free to just kind of jump in. What have you seen in the last few years that's important for young people who are coming into the field, or people who are coming into the field, to understand about what is becoming most important when brands are starting to think about their strategies and how that's changing? What are some of the things that you keep hearing from your clients as this is something that we want to be in the know about, or this is how we want people to receive us? I think that's important and interesting for young people to be able to understand what it is that brands are looking for when they come to you.
So I can start. I think one of the key things, and I feel like when you're in the industry circle, the word authenticity starts to lose some of its meaning because everybody's talking about how to be authentic. But when you're looking at it from a social impact and a purpose perspective, it's really making sure you are clear on what that purpose is, what your values are, and let those be the drivers of your decisions. Because if you're not quite clear on what your values are and what's important to the business and what's important to the individuals within the business, that's when you find yourself in these tough spots of, oh, maybe we shouldn't have spoken out on that issue, or maybe we should have spoken out on that issue, and not speaking out is actually a clear indication of your stance on the issue as well. So I think really having a clear sense of that values, the purpose, the intent, and staying closely aligned to that, and having tough conversations to check yourself along the way is one of the things I think is most important as you go into the space, as you're thinking about how a brand or how a company can make an impact in the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's totally important. And I think one of the things that brands come to us for is to help them find that authentic story, because, brands are just made up of a collection of people, right? And not every person has the same idea about something. So our role in that mix is to help them really understand what their company is, what it can stand for, and really shape that strategy. An old mentor of mine once said strategists are probably more like psychiatrists than marketers in some way, because that's part of our job, to kind of put them on the chair and understand what really motivates them and kind of understand and translate that into communications.
I like that.
Yeah.
My clients are from nonprofits, and they want to make sure that they're in the right places. And so that's always changing. So it can be kind of hard to chase people around from like platform to platform, and where should you be? Where should you set up camp? And then as soon as you're there, it seems like everyone's gone on to something else. So they're really looking at that. I mean, it used to be a lot easier, right, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
No, not even more than that, probably. TV, print, radio, outdoor.
Yeah.
And everyone went out to lunch. I mean, that was nice. And now it's just like, it feels like it's just shattered everywhere. It's so fragmented. It's moving around every day. So it's just, we try and stay really dynamic, put together an amazing piece of content, tell amazing stories, and then just chase everybody around as best we can.
Yeah. Well,
Can I add one thing to the, I think in addition to the authenticity and the strategy and really knowing, I think it's important that both from a brand or a company taking a stand on something, but also as you're looking for careers in this space, make sure that the company is walking the talk.
Yeah.
And so knowing the values, yes, knowing the purpose and the intent is critically important, but also if you're going to take a stand on an issue that relates to women in leadership, make sure that you have women in leadership in your own company.
Yeah,
You'd be surprised how many companies overlook that because they're thinking through the lens of how do I engage my consumer, how do I engage my external audience, but especially now we are seeing that employees are activists and they are pressuring their leadership to take stands on issues. So really making sure that you're catering to all needs, and as Tim was saying, the psychiatry chair, couldn't be further, that could be not, oh man, I am not in communications tonight. That couldn't be closer to the truth, because it is really digging deep, exploring what are the drivers, what are the motivators, but make sure that you do that for your internal audience as well.
And that's something that at my company we talk about a lot at Culture House. We're women of color owned, and a lot of our clients are people like Planned Parenthood and Dell, and they come to us and say we want to do films about women or people of color. We just did a series for Planned Parenthood that was directed for Black women and Latinx women. So we were really particular about the crew and the writers and the development is Black women and Latinx women, because those are the people who really understand that audience. And to create, what I talk a lot about is that content supply chain. How do you really build a content supply chain that reflects your audience and that reflects what it is that you're trying to do? And I think right now is a really interesting time. I work a lot on the film and TV side, and we've translated that to a brand practice, but the idea is that what's behind the camera is just as important as what's in front of the camera. So that's one of the things that I talk a lot about with my clients, and sometimes, to your point, it's an uphill battle. Like, hey, it's important to have, the person who's directing this be a woman, because you're asking women for this ad to be half naked in front of the camera, and they may not want to do that with someone that they're not comfortable around. So there's lots of ways to really be thinking about that and walking the talk, so to speak. And I wanted to pull on a point that you brought up, which is that it's so shattered, it's so fragmented, there's so many things happening. What are some takeaways for people in terms of, are there publications or really good accounts, like Instagram accounts or different things that they can be following to be on trend, to know what's going on in the industry? Are there things that you all are looking at to really understand as, hey, like this is something that I should be talking to my brands about, so that they can also be on top of what's going on?
What do I follow? I like to look at research about usership. Pew Internet research is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
But that research takes a while to come out, and because it's moving around so much.
And where do you find that? Just to like, where do you find that research?
It's a website with a bunch of pretty boring white papers, but it's good research. No, but that's a good one. I don't know about an Instagram account that I follow. But it's hard to keep on top of that. Oh, what do you do, Tim? What do you think?
Yeah, there's two slightly different questions there. One is, what do you do to keep on top of the industry?
Yeah.
And then the other is, what do you do to keep on top of culture? And they're two different things.
Yep.
Keeping on top of the industry is...
I think top of the industry
Okay.
would be interesting. How do they know? What can they be reading? And then, of course, your tips on keeping on top of culture as well.
Totally. Well, for the industry piece, I would just, you're all aware of the marketing that brands do that you love, right? Because you've seen it and you want to consume it and you want to engage with it. Find out who made it. Follow those Instagram accounts. Follow those company websites, those Twitter feeds. Because there's such a big industry and lots of people do it in lots of different ways. And like, not everything is for everyone, but it's really just finding the thing that you're passionate about, following those people, those individuals, those agencies that you're into is what I would advise.
Yeah. I am a little bit of a news junkie, and so I've actually had to set up filters on my inbox because I get distracted by all the newsletters that come in, the alerts that come in, the reports that come out. But my go-to every day is making sure I flip through Fast Company. I think that they are just premier reporters. They really have a good grasp on a lot of the social and environmental issues that I focus on with my brands and my companies. And then if you want to do a deeper review, looking at publications like The Atlantic, Harvard Business Review, right? Some of these more academic pieces. But there are a number of trade organizations that you can sign up for their newsletters. They give you daily digests on different topics. 3BL, which is a Brands Taking Stands platform. Sustainable brands. There's a ton out there. So I think the problem on my side is actually being more intentional about what I choose to read and where I spend my time, because I'm also the person that on my desktop, my internet browser has 50 tabs open. I'm like, oh, I'm going to read it later. And then the scary blue screen comes up and I'm like, I didn't save any of these links and I want to read them all. So I think it's just being really intentional about what you're reading. But I would also say, especially in the social impact and the brands taking stands place, it's important just to be out there in real life and a consumer of what is happening in culture, what is happening in the daily news, what is happening in your local municipality, because that's where I get a lot of my inspiration, is actually having feet on the ground and knowing what's happening, and then how you can insert brands and companies to actually address those issues. So I am of the mindset of sign up for as much as you can and then start to weed out or unsubscribe as you get more into the space and learn what sort of articles and coverage sparks for you.
I think that's good advice. I think the biggest mistake, not mistake, but the thing that agencies most want from people who are coming into the business is just real depth and passion around something. So the mistake you can make is try and spread yourself too thin. Culture is endless, and so is the internet. So you can't ever know everything all at once. If you get to the Instagram thing that says you're all caught up, you probably you know what I'm talking about. But look, honestly, find a cause, find a passion point, find a culture or a subculture that you're passionate about, and then go deeper on that, and then bring that into an interview or into an agency, because that's what we're looking for. We don't need generalists who are smart. There's lots of people like that, actually. We're looking for people with a point of view, with an identity, with an interest or a passion that could really bring that into the creative work. Everything that we showed earlier, that work was made by people who are total nerds or geeks about those subject matters. That's who we want, not the generalists, I'm afraid.
No, that's great feedback, and that's good for people to know as they're thinking about applying for jobs and interviews and such. I suppose on that note, are there things that you already said, Tim, but are there things that you're specifically looking for that when you are interviewing, you're like, oh, that's something that kind of puts you over the edge? Or is there something to look out for that's maybe not such a helpful thing to do?
I do a lot of hiring. I'm always looking for that unique perspective and someone that's really passionate about their work. They're just ready to go. I mean, you can tell when someone knows exactly what they're talking about and are confident and really want to work for you. I definitely respond to people that have done their research. It's not a form letter. It's pretty quick and to the point. It doesn't tell their whole entire story in a cover letter or attempts to. People that can just do those quick hits, know your company before they come in, and I'm always impressed by that. the research done.
Yeah, I think, the attributes that I really look for in the interview process and meeting with candidates is, are they curious, right? Are they resourceful, and are they problem solvers? Because I think with those three attributes, right, you might not be the expert on a certain issue, or you might not have all of the experience from a communications perspective, but as long as you're curious, you're resourceful, and you're really looking to help solve problems, I know that you'll be able to plug into whatever the issue is, whatever the account need is, and make an impact. So those are some of the key attributes, but then also positivity, right? These are people that you're going to work with day in and day out, and so I can't stress the importance to me personally of that chemistry and wanting to know that the person that's going to be on my team, that I'm going to be spending late nights with, that I'm going to be traveling with, is somebody that I will actually enjoy and can have a conversation that's related to things outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, which I'm sure many of you have heard, but I can reiterate that even when I'm hiring, I really look for culture fit and really for people who are going to fit the culture of our company, especially that, we are a medium-sized company. We're not a giant corporation. And so we do spend a lot of time together, and there might be the most talented person who knows every single Instagram account and is all caught up. But if they're not pleasant to be around and they don't fit in culturally, they're not interested in learning and they're not teachable, it's not a good fit. So I think that's an important thing that probably all of us are looking for when we're talking to folks.
I might just add one thing as well. It's just like have a point of view, So I actually hired someone recently, I think she's 23, 24-year-old. She spent like the whole interview disagreeing with me about everything. And I was like, you're great, you're amazing. And we were like talking about whether or not a brand should ever use OK Boomer as a hashtag to us. We were just talking about all this stuff and talking about Popeye's chicken sandwiches. And she just knew so much more about this than I did. And I was suggesting things, and she was like looking at me and rolling her eyes, being like, you're so old. And she was like, yeah, you're like this internet nerd, like you're amazing, you're hired. So like, that there's ultimately, this is what I guess people don't tell you. You are paid to have a point of view in this industry, right? That's ultimately what it is. And you can back it up with data and have all the arguments and all the rigor and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately you're paid for either your taste or your point of view. Yeah. And so when you're looking to hire someone, you want that, right? Because I can't teach you that. You have to have that. So.
Yeah. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what some of the different roles are at a place like an agency. You mentioned it a bit in your intro, but how does a brand come to an agency? Who do they talk to? And what are some of the more entry-level roles that people can be looking for as they're thinking about getting into the game?
Well, entry level is a lot of coordination and management on our accounts. They come in and they're going to be the one doing, this is not very exciting because it's entry level, but they're going to be routing the deliverables, doing the day-to-day contacts and working with the account managers and just making sure everything's humming along. And if you're able to do that, people respect it so much and they are just thrilled. Because we are always so busy that if you can take things off the table of an account manager or a lead strategist, people just love you for it. So if you're coming in entry level and you're just hustling and just making sure it all gets done and making the people above you feel like you have it covered and you're taking some things off their plate, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I always say that no matter where you are in the ranks, your job is always to make your boss's job easier. And so, thinking proactively about right? Your boss has to send a letter or an attachment out to a client. What's the cover letter that you're sending to your boss so that all your boss has to do is forward the note that you've already drafted? That goes a long way. In terms of different positions, so different than the marketing and advertising. So I am at a communications firm. So we do more of the public relations and event work. But when I started out of college, I knew that I wanted to go to an agency because I knew that it would give me the most exposure to the most things because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It took a lot of interviewing and a lot of informational conversations to actually understand what corporate PR meant, and how that was different from consumer PR and how that was different from healthcare PR. So I wanted to go to an agency. I ended up on the corporate team where I started at Golan, and was able to experience a lot of different clients across a lot of different sectors, but also a lot of different communications disciplines. And I think that's still true today. And I think even more so in the agency world, you're getting even more exposure to different types of disciplines. So everything I heard people say in the audience before, copywriting, content development, strategy, planning, media relations, partnerships, program design. There's so much that you can experience when you're at an agency, probably more so going in-house somewhere in particular, because you just have to be agile and you have to be able to flex into and out of different roles quickly. So I think having a sense of what you want is important when you're exploring the career, but I don't think you need to know exactly what it is when you're entering.
I switched path a couple of times, but it is helpful to know what job you're interested in when you speak to an agency. There are 4 basic ones, right? There's creative, which is probably like the most obvious. You're actually the person concepting the commercial, the piece of stuff that goes out. That normally is a copywriter or art director combination. You normally have had to gone to art school to get those kinds of jobs, not necessarily. Then you have strategy, which is what I mentioned earlier. That's what I do. So that's looking at the marketplace, understanding the consumer, deciding on the direction. Then, of course, you have client services, which is ultimately how you manage that client relationship, and you're like the conductor of the overall process. And then you have production, who's the people who sit behind the cameras and edit it and bring it all together. So some of those have different levels of education you need to have gone through beforehand, but most of them actually you can kind of go in at entry level and just learn it. But just have an idea of what you want to do, I think, before you start those conversations. You can always change your mind later.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's very helpful to understand what the different tracks are, even though there's a lot of overlap. I would say, I probably speak for all of us, that there's no straight line in this business. So there's lots of
and no 2 days are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's interesting to think also just a little bit about the brand landscape now. What have you seen from your clients? Why do we think that brands are so interested in this kind of value-based storytelling all of a sudden? What's changed so dramatically that everybody's trying to make a statement with everything? Why is that happening?
I think there's a couple of big trends that are colliding. I think the first is there's almost no meaningful differentiation between products now, right? They're all good. Like if you walk into a store and buy a phone, they're all kind of good. I know Apple's nicer, whatever, but generally, if you buy a soda, they're all the same. There's not much product differentiation going on, right? So it has to come from the brand and more intangible values. That's the first trend. Second trend is driven by a lot of the people who are in this room. What do you value? What makes you think something is worth paying more for? What makes you think you should put your hard-earned money behind it? And what badge do you want to wear, right? And I think that's changed. And that's where you see the kind of the social good impact piece come from, right? That's where value is being attached to. So if you think about those 2 things colliding, all the products are kind of the same, and you have an audience that really values some kind of social impact or social good. That's when companies really have to evaluate what they're doing and seeing if they can start to live up to that promise. And that's where I think you start to see this trend coming from.
Are there any campaigns of late that any of you feel like, oh, that was a great campaign? It's a good one for people to use as a case study or to look at, and that they can maybe, if they're not already familiar with it. Anything that you've all liked?
The Love Has No Labels campaign, I worked on that, led the digital strategy there. That was a really good one. That one did real well. It was probably the most successful thing I've ever worked on. And that was a coming together of all sorts of people. Our angle at first was pitting these brands against each other, like Pepsi and Coke are coming together in the name of love and diversity and inclusion, and all these different kinds of brands. But then once that video took off, that was pretty much it. And that was just a beautiful piece of content. Mm-hmm. That was because people ask me a lot about, what was the secret sauce there? What happened? But it was a great, great video. And then we had an exclusive with Upworthy. So they're the ones that kind of lifted it up to a place with the right demographic and the right group to have it sort of tip over into viral land. And then we had so many brands at the tables, like banks, soda, all sorts of stuff. So we were able to use all of their channels. So we just like had all those assets just blasting out on all those channels. So it had tremendous reach. I think it has about 250 million views to this day. It is just,
awesome.
it was great. And then there's always that like magic dust. Like the stars did align. You know, it's that I don't know if we'll ever be able to recreate a Love Has No Labels. We're gonna try every time.
Yeah.
And our clients always ask us for it.
Yeah. You should check that out if you haven't seen it. It's great.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
It's a good one.
From the brand side, I think two that come to mind that I'm sure everybody in this room is familiar with are the Nike Dream Crazy and then the Always Like a Girl campaign. I think what happens, the magic there was they really struck a cultural chord. Right, they were willing to come out and more Nike than always come out on a really controversial issue and draw a line in the sand. And the timing of it all was pretty perfect, right? They launched their campaign, I think it was the day before the NFL season kickoff last year. So there was already a lot of attention about Kaepernick and the standing for the national anthem and what the NFL was going to do from a policy perspective. So they dropped that placement, they dropped that ad, and the content behind it was so beautiful and powerful that it was really, it like took everybody sort of by shock. But I think the important thing to understand about that campaign is the reason it was so successful was they were laser focused on who their audience was, right? They knew they were going to get backlash. They knew that there was going to be criticism. They knew that they were going to have people burning Nike shoes in their backyard. And their response was, that's not our target. That's not who we're going after.
Yeah.
So I think, thinking about that strategy on the back end and really understanding who is it that you're looking to engage and what are you willing to risk is something that's so powerful. And that's where you then start to see the power of a campaign, because then, right, there was almost a debate around the campaign and was it good, was it not good, which then just brought more attention to the campaign and to the product, and it's something that is still marquee. And then if you look at the sales, it's like incredible what that did.
I mean, haters are really useful. I don't feel like I've done my job until we start getting nasty comments. And then people look at all these terrible comments. I'm like, that's beautiful. That's the job.
Yeah.
Have a point of
That
view.
means we made it.
Yeah. I think like to look at brands who have done this really well, like look who was doing it before it was cool. So I think Patagonia comes to mind. They're like they've been on this environment. They're like the Bernie Sanders of brands. They've been on this train for a very long time. They haven't changed their message. Right from and more recently up to like suing Trump for closing down some of the parklands, all the way up to encouraging you not to buy their jackets because they've got lifetime guarantees and you should be looking for a used one. Everything that brand does has been so authentic from day one. So I think if you're looking for great case studies, I'd look at those kinds of brands. And I think if you're on the other side where we are, it's like how can we help brands build that roadmap from like perhaps where they are now to give them some credibility to the point where they've got something they can actually say, all the way through to that's something they can stand for 5 years and beyond. So.
One other one that comes to mind, and it's relevant just because of the time of year that we're in, is the REI Opt Outside campaign. Right? Also, mission-driven company, all about getting people outdoors. And the fact that they closed not only their retail stores on Black Friday, but shut down their website so they weren't processing orders. Like that, you start to see then, okay, a company is willing to put revenue and sales on hold because they're doubling down on something that they really truly believe in. And then, the profits that they were making, they were donating back to, I forget exactly the fund, but it was an environmental fund. So those sort of things where brands and companies are willing to put a stake in the ground and willing to maybe pause and look at more of the long-term view than just the short-term view, I find those to be the more successful campaigns.
There's that quote, isn't there? And I'm going to say it's Gandhi, but I'm not sure if it is. It's a value isn't a value until it costs you something. And I think that's a good way of thinking about this.
That's great. I like that. I don't know if it's Gandhi, but I think we'll find out. We'll Google it later. Seth Godin is somebody who's interesting, who talks a lot about marketing. One of the things that he says is, it's not about trying to please everybody. I think that's, Leanne, jigging off of what you said, is that starts to water down the message, right? So figuring out, like, can you really, really super serve a sliver of the audience, because then they're going to become the best ambassadors that you could possibly have for your brand. So again, leaning into that idea of, like, when you're walking in for interviews, having a point of view, being really somebody who can be an expert inside of a place, whether that's coming from your own lived experience or something that you're very passionate about, or whatever it might be. That is always something that right now especially is so valued in this climate where we're talking about, well, who should be telling whose story, and find out what your story is and really double down on that. Okay, great, thanks. And then it's funny, you said the Dream Crazy campaign. The funny thing happens all the time with clients. Like, so tell me some, what kind of campaign? Oh, well, we want to do something like the. I'm like, really? You and everybody else. Do you know how much that costs? We want it to go viral. We want it to look like this. I'm like, and what's your budget again? But I think, so which takes me to. When you are working with brands, there's a lot of times where we have to push back, right, on our brands and say, hey, maybe that's not a great idea, or this might be out of your budget, or this might not be. What advice do you have as people are developing their professional skills to deal with pushing back and having to kind of say, hey, maybe we can't do that, especially in a service-based industry where often we really are trying to serve and keep our clients, right? Some sort of skills or strategies.
I'm a fan of the sandwich. You start with something positive, then you hide all the bits where you push back and tell them you can't do that. No, we would never do that, and it absolutely makes no sense. And and then you go back to the nice stuff. You kind of like sandwich it in there. But as long as you're diplomatic, and I'll always say that the reason why we're pushing back so hard is because we're so passionate about it. If we didn't care, we'd just do whatever you wanted and take your money. We could do that.
Yeah.
But the reason why we're talking, pushing back and saying, no, we really want to do this, is because we want to do a successful campaign with you. And we want the results that you want. So as a team, we have to do this together. And it's not like just because you're the client, we're just going to do everything you want. I mean, there's the term that we always use. There's some, we don't put it in our portfolio, and someone will be like, did you do that? And it's client-driven. That's what I was like. That's client-driven. Because sometimes they bulldoze you, and you lose a lot of battles along the way, and then it ends up looking just not how you thought it was going to look. That's a client-driven project. Yeah. But you won some battles, so you just try and get as many and win as many as you can. Yeah. You have a good product, you have good results.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting in this landscape as we, and some of you might be interested and end up on the brand side, not just on the agency side. So it's interesting to kind of have these conversations and think about it, because one of the things that I see a lot of is people want to do all of the things that we're talking about, but when it really comes down to the practice and maybe the final cut of the piece of content or whatever it is, there's a lot of nervousness around, oh, well, we didn't say the name of the computer. I'm like, yeah, because nobody talks like that. Nobody says, this is my XYZ Experian book 22. It's just like screaming that this is a long form commercial, which is no longer interesting, right? So I think that as you all get into this industry and maybe find yourself on the brand side, really thinking about how both sides of this need to work together. Because I think I've had a lot of that where people start off really lofty, and then when it comes down to it, we get into the brass tacks of like, how many times did we say the name of the brand? Did we say it in the first 3 seconds? Did we do this? Did we do that? But that's all the stuff that's why it becomes client-driven.
Yeah. Being comfortable with conflict, I think, is really important, especially today, and knowing how to navigate that in a way that is collaborative and you're understanding and you're hearing, you're listening. But conflict is actually good. Conflict means that there's tension and that there is, as you were saying, passion on both sides of it. I am a Brené Brown fangirl. Me too. Yeah, and I know we were. But she has a tactic that's called the rumble, right? And so if you don't have her books, I highly recommend all of them. I'm currently reading Dare to Lead. But she gives you the actual tools to how do you have a tough conversation, right? How do you address something that's bothering you, whether it be a client that's bothering you or a team member that's bothering you or a situation at work that's bothering you. I think it's really important to just figure out what your mechanism is and how to address it in a way, because if you don't address it head on, it will continue to fester and it will end up just being a bigger problem down the road. But as you were saying earlier, we look to hire people with points of view. Clients hire agencies who have a point of view. So they don't want you to just be a pushover and just, take their marching orders on what you're doing, but have that respectful dialogue and be able to point to why you feel so strongly about something. And yeah, of course, it's negotiation, right? You're gonna have to meet somewhere in the middle. But I think as long as you listen to the other side and hear what the perspective is and why there is pushback, that's usually then when you go down a path that creates something even more powerful because you're responding to everybody's needs.
Yeah. I think it's the other, just like any partnership, really. It's just like, try and only work with people who respect you and put time and energy into that relationship. So hopefully you're not in that situation too many times.
Yeah. Great.
I would do a music festival in Sweden, and it's called All My Friends Are Stars. Now, when you're talking about brands that have made a really big impact, a lot of them are very well-known brands, and they take a position. And everybody finds out about it because this super well-known brand is saying something that is meaningful. When it comes to brands that are just beginning, like my brand, what can we do that we'd take a stand and to develop our position and make waves?
So many of the brands that I work with would love to do what you're doing now. Because look, if you've not had a stand for 100 years, it's quite difficult now to take a stand and say that we were always about this and try and retrofit that whole thing. So you're in an amazing situation because you're starting your company, your business, your event with this idea, right? So I think just like write down your values, stick to them, keep on believing them, and eventually I'm sure you'll succeed. I mean, all of these companies we talk about today, Patagonia, 7th Generation, one of our clients, who's a sustainable household and personal care brand. These all started with a few people in a room who are like, no, we're starting a business because we believe in doing it a certain way. And we know that if we do it long enough this way, we'll be big. And they were. So keep doing it.
And those, when you look at the competitive set, the brands, the challenger brands are the ones that are to take note of, right? Because they have the clean slate, they're coming out, they're able to build that into their DNA. You look at the Allbirds, the
Voices.
the what?
Outdoor Voices.
Yeah, Outdoor Voices. Like they're all starting their whole journey based around a value proposition that actually meets the consumer demands.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Hey.
My name is Alberto Cherry. I'm a media management student at the New School and a former planner back in Colombia. One of the most frequent causes that the brands stand for is wellness, usually. But I do want to talk about wellness in our own industry and how we are working on life-work balance, being an industry where a lot of people is disbanding, a lot of talent is going away from the advertising world. What are you doing as managers and leaders and in your own agencies to keep up the good talent, to keep up the good work, but also a really, really nice balance between what we need to do and not burning out all the oil all the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, there's so many different causes and places we can pick off, but I think one of the things I think our industry is doing a good job of, at least my agency and a few others, around the space of maternity leave. So 72 and Sunny has 6 months full paid maternity leave, for example.
I love that. That's
I know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
beautiful.
I come from Europe where it's a year, but anyway.
Great.
He's not even
But you guys, 6 months is good. And things like, and I know there's a lot of controversy around this, but unlimited paid time off, if used and deployed correctly, allows people to have much more flexible work schedules. I mean, look, we don't work in the business. We kind of have to be there all day, every day. So I think just as a manager, not demanding people be at their desks 9 a.m., especially when you're not. So I think it's stuff like that, but I think it's the hardcore policy changes in things like maternity leave that actually do cost you a lot of money as a business, but it's super important to retain that talent because we can't have like half the workforce never wanting to come back, So.
And I have the luxury of being a smaller agency, so there is no real rules around that. I just trust everyone to do their work when they need to do their work, and they can manage their time. And so it's super flexible. You can come in, you don't have to come in. You can be remote, you can take off a lot of time. I think that's super important. I'm big on work-life balance, and if you can't come in because you're having a mental health day, then that's that. And no one's going to be looking around like upset that you're not there. So just having those flexible days, I think, is really important to people.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that it is not a 9-to-5 job anymore.
Yeah.
You're checking email at night, you're signing on when you get home, you're checking in on the weekend, right? And so that is a choice that if you're entering this industry, that is a choice that you need to be aware that you're making, especially when you're in professional services. However, I think that seeing people as people, right, and trusting that everybody's managing their schedule in a way that's responsible, they're going to get their work done. I think that there's a different energy. I mean, where I am, it's not a very hierarchical. Yes, there are a lot of levels, and yes, there's leadership team and all of that. But once you get into the team structure, it's about the relationship between the team. And as long as you instill that trust and there's accountability, I think flexibility and just understanding and compassion goes such a long way.
And flexibility is the big one for sure
Yeah.
that people
Yeah, we're all
want.
talking about
I just had a baby, and well, I say just, feels like just, but it's been about a year and a half, and I bring him in at the end of the day, and I do that too to kind of show people like we are whole people inside of this place, and sometimes you have to run out to take care of your kid, or you have to you have to do that, you do that, and so I try to lead by example as best I can, and I think that thank you for bringing that up. It's important for all of us to think about also when you're looking for jobs to be asking those questions about the culture that you're about to go into, because you also want to be making sure you're thinking about yourself as you find the right place. Thank you.
Hi. You guys hear me? My name's Amanda. I'm actually a graduate student right now at the School of Public Health, but I have 15 years of experience working in advertising.
Wow.
So my job was previously in like client service, did a little bit of strategy, obviously exiting a little higher than the entry level and entering into the strategic roles. And I'm having a little bit of trouble rectifying what I'm going to do after I've learned all what I've learned in public health. And so I was drawn to this because of the second half of the title of the program, which was in the public interest. And I'm trying to figure out a way that I can take like what I've learned in public health about vulnerable populations, about all of those things, and rectify that against some of the realities of what I've seen in the advertising industry. So, McDonald's is always going to want to advertise in Harlem, and, Vino is going to say that they're, that they don't test on animals because the combination of their products doesn't, but the individual parts do. Like, there's those things that the pharmaceutical industry is going to be a big driver of a lot of, especially New York agency budgets and finances, because it's such a big piece of the advertising world. And I'm having trouble deciding or figuring out like what I can do with that knowledge. And I was wondering from the panel, sort of like what roles, and I know that a lot of your roles are sort of bridge the social impact part, but like what in reality do you think agencies are open to now as with this change when we're also trying to balance the profits that the clients want to see? Is that like a concise enough sort of, it's a big question. So what is the reality of different roles, or what kind of appetite do you really think that clients are having in being able to put altruism side by side to profit?
Side by side to profit.
We're always going to need to make profit, right? Like companies are driven by business, and if it looks good for the business, they're going to take a public stand. If it doesn't look good for their profits, they're not going to do it. But it feels like that's starting to shift. And I'm just wondering, like, what roles do you think that there are, maybe at the higher strategic levels, or what conversations are actually happening where you think that, I don't know, that there's more of a space for this?
You definitely shouldn't go into a mainstream agency. So I'll tell you that now. That's what I do.
Yeah,
So you're going to have to compromise in too many different places with your deep knowledge and specialist interests. You might have one brand that is doing the right thing and 9 brands that aren't. You should go and work with one of these two.
Yeah, then I was wondering how you make, where's the money, how do you make a profit in nonprofit advertising?
Yeah, I would look at social good agencies and social impact agencies that would love your skill set, especially ones with a lot of clients in health and mental health. I do have a lot of friends that are in-house and at social good agencies that both have communications and MPAs and public health.
Yeah.
And it's just really good to know all about that from almost like a clinical side of the populations that you're trying to help. A lot of government agencies will love you, like the CDC would love that. But yeah, I feel like you're going more towards a mainstream agency with brands. Coming over to my side of things. It's fun, come on over. And you can still have a wonderful life and a great salary. You'll be fine. You'll be good. But my clients they don't care as much about profits. They care about awareness, education, moving the needle on public health, getting healthcare services out there. Those are all the kind of messaging that we do.
All right. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Katherine. I'm a junior at Fashion Institute of Technology, and I'm in the advertising and digital design program. I wanted to ask you guys, how do you keep up with meme culture? Because I feel as though memes are, in essence, the future of advertising for millennials and Gen Z, Gen X. And do you guys follow meme pages, or do you have younger interns who just brief you every day on memes?
would
If
love
so,
a
can
meme
I be
briefing
that
every day.
intern? Sorry, continue.
The second one.
I was just going to say I would love a meme briefing every day. That sounds like a lot of
Because
fun.
I can do that. No.
Perfect. Well played. Well played. Well played.
That's your expertise.
That's exactly it. So we, in our social and comms group, there are about 5 or 6 people, and at least 3 or 4 of them are under 25 and just internet geeks and just love all this stuff and tell the rest of us how old we are and out of touch and how to do it. So you past a certain point, once it becomes a job keeping up with that stuff, that's probably where it's time for you to pass the baton on to someone who just lives it. So we have people like you who know about that stuff.
So that's a probable option to apply for.
Oh, absolutely. It's like
every
a
agency has
I can see
that?
what's going. Yeah, almost every agency does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You're looking for roles that say something like either social media strategist, community manager, that those kinds of titles are the kinds of roles you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Arielle, and I'm currently a sophomore majoring in Media, Culture, and Communication at NYU. And I just have a question. I know that the REI case was actually brought up, and I'm aware that they've been doing this for 3 years, and actually their Cyber Monday sale has increased by 30%, and it was really successful. But the thing is, what if it didn't succeed, and when does the strategy part come in when you guys decide to take such a big risk in advertising and marketing?
Any big flops?
Loads.
What happens after that?
I mean, I think from a strategy perspective, right? We had talked about this earlier. It's being willing to take enough of a risk that you feel that the benefits will outweigh the risks. I think making sure that you have a lot of input throughout the ideation and conceptualization process is really important. And that's not just input from within your own organization or brand. It's also getting input from outdoor organizations and from consumers and focus groups and panel, making sure that you have representation and diversity in points of view so that you're going out with the most thoughtful and strategic campaign launch. And then I think there's always the backup plan, right? There's always risk that they go out with the opt-out side and a certain president tweets something and then everybody's focused on that for the day. So there's always risk that you won't get the attention. But usually that's built into the strategy and built into the planning. And also being able to pivot pretty quickly, right? So making sure, taking in feedback, okay, why did this land flat? Wow, this is a totally different reaction than we thought. But quickly being able to put a SWAT team against it, figure out what those insights are, and pivot the strategy so that it's not all lost for nothing, but that actually helps the brand be seen as more responsive and in touch with their community.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Mike. I'm an international business student at Fordham University. My question is, as an agency, how do you mitigate the paradox that arises when a brand wants to preach anti-consumerism or have an advertisement as such, but they still end up making money off those anti-consumers ads, like Patagonia when they ran the New York Times full spread where they were like, don't buy this jacket, or the REI like closing on Black Friday. So how do you mitigate the paradox?
Because in the end, they did turn a profit from their campaign about, we don't want you to buy anything.
We don't want to promote consumerism, but at the end of the day, we're still making money off of this ad.
Okay, I've got an answer for you. So look, the seventh generation, I spoke to them about them earlier, their founder had this belief that business is the most powerful force on earth. Now, we might not like it, but I think it's true, right? So if you actually want to create any change these days, it's unlikely to come from political sources. It's actually going to come from business sources. So I don't think there is such a paradox, actually, because take a client like seventh generation, if they sell more detergent that year, they research the next plant-based formula that has even less impact on the environment, and that goes back into the business. So I think clients that do this really well actually use the money and the profits they get to pay all their people, of course, and to make a profit, but also actually to further their products and their offering to further that cause too. And if that cycle is working, then they actually are a business for good. If that cycle's not working, then they're just greenwashing, and that's something completely different. So.
Yeah, and Google the term, triple bottom line, this idea of like how you think about your business, that is part of what your impact is and the kind of change you're making. It's not just something that you talk about and add on as corporate social responsibility, which is of course very important and there's all related, but it can lead to better business and making more money, but also still doing good, right? So that might just be a philosophical thing. I think there's a lot of people who are like, capitalism is the worst and this, that, but there's an argument to be made that making money and doing good are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So that might just be beyond the scope of the panel, but it's certainly an interesting conversation to have, and thank you for positing that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anusha. I'm a recent graduate from Brooklyn College, and I'm part of the Verizon Ad Fellows program right now. My question goes back to Leanne's point about having an internal audience and your outer external brand aligning with what you do within the company. And I just wanted to ask if any of you have had a problem like that in the past, or how do companies solve for something like that? Because internal culture is something that is so hard to maintain or carry on. And when you're taking a stand on some kind of social impact issue, how does that align within the company? Like, you want to be perceived as a young company, but the internal culture might not be very young or modern or startup-like. So I don't know if you guys have had something like that in the past, or how you would solve something like that.
Say how you do it well. I haven't had a massive problem with it, but the way you do it well is to set a really clear internal vision for your company and what's your own social impact mission. So we have one at 72 and Sunny, which is to expand and diversify the creative class, because we believe that the more voices are heard in creativity, the better the work will be. So not only is that social mission really important for the product that we make, our creativity will be better, but also help improve the diversity within the industry, which is ultimately going to improve the experience of people everywhere, right? So if there's a really clear mission like that at the top, that's what you need then. And then underneath that, you need to build really clear initiatives that deliver against that, and things that are concrete and measurable, and things that you can demonstrate progress on year. So if you have those things in place, then I think you start to, your culture will tend to fit around that stuff.
And we get picky about our clients to make sure that everybody's on board with the cause that we're working on. So we go after the clients that we love their causes and we're like complete fans of them. A lot of times I get to walk in the room and be like, we love you guys, you're our heroes, because those are the people that we want to work for. So as long as we're working really hard on the causes that I know everybody on the team loves, everything else kind of falls into place.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Arianna Lizio. I'm a master's student at Gallatin right now. I'm also founder of Cash for Gold Pictures, a production company. Not to put anyone on the spot, but I'm curious, at either the beginning of your careers in these various paths, is there like a standout anxiety moment or horror story or like a time when you were just like, this is
last
it?
week, not the beginning of
I
my
mean,
career.
yeah, the more
always.
recent,
Yeah.
the better too.
So it was 2006.
Yeah.
Oh, no, are
No,
you ready?
please.
You have a second
Oh.
part?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, any like insights from that? Was there a turning point where you're like, oh, we got this, or any words of wisdom there?
Well, when I first started out on the internet, it was the wild, wild west. It still kind of is. But I started in suicide prevention in-house at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I was their digital person. So the digital person for a hotline. And Facebook was just becoming popular. And I remember going into my director's office, who's a psychiatrist, and I was like, I'm going to start a Facebook page for the National Suicide Hotline. I'm going to start a conversation about suicide. I hear that's what everyone's doing on social. They're starting conversations. So I just, put, no strategy whatsoever, just was on Facebook and put the profile picture up. And I was like, all right, got to start a conversation. Everybody wanted to talk about suicide, and everyone said that they wanted, to kill themselves online. So then we were responsible for everybody that was talking about how they wanted to kill themselves online. So I learned very quickly, you should never do anything without a strategy. You can't just pop things up, especially with something that's sensitive, and just, here we go. Learned a lot from that. But we very quickly, though, I did create a need very quickly for the hotline because they didn't want to get into digital. They were still doing things by phone. But once they saw the need out there and that everyone was talking about suicide online before they would pick up a phone, they were much more comfortable there. Then we were on the phone with Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the big guys putting all these processes in place to tag people, to send them to get rescues. If they're in imminent danger, to do suicide risk assessments. We set up all of those things. So something great came out of it, but I was super panicked there for a while.
I would say that as my career has shifted, there's all different kinds of mistakes that you make too. And so, in the beginning of my career, it was a lot of mistakes for being green, right? Being inexperienced, like messing something up. I was a tape runner at TV Land in the year 2001, which meant I literally delivered tapes from one building to another building. And apparently there wasn't a way to do that in 2001. So one of my jobs was to make a bunch of duplicates, and instead of making duplicates of X tape, I made a duplicate of a 10 times more expensive tape. So I ended up, costing the project 10 times more than it was. So stuff like that, and my advice on that is, you screwed up, take accountability for it, and don't try to hide it, and people appreciate that, and come back quick and come back stronger and don't do it again, right? That's the best thing that I can, and so that happened to me recently with somebody who works for me. They made a sort of inexperienced mistake, and I just remembered that. And as a manager now, I was like, it's okay. These things happen as long as that person is taking accountability and growing. It happens, it's life. And I would say as my career's gone on, the mistakes now feel like the stakes are different, but a lot of my mistakes now are personnel driven. Not mistakes, but I would say missteps are things that saying the wrong thing to this agent, and that agent now thinks this, and this person so figuring out communications, I would say, is in our, especially in this field, really being very clear, not ambiguous about the way you communicate with people, what it is that you mean, what the deals actually are on the table, what the expectations are, because those types of mistakes are a lot harder to unentangle from than the ones that are, okay, let's move on. So really thinking about your communication style, I would say from early part of your career would be smart.
Hi, everyone. My name is Summer. I'm a graduate student in branding and integrated communication. So nowadays, everybody talk about social media. And however, there are reports and shows that social media generate social isolation a lot. And then there are so many organizations they started coming out against the social media because they thought that a person who got much attention online will feel much vanity in the reality. So as a brand strategist, I always believe that the role of the agency is to build a connection between a brand and its target audience. So my question is, do you guys really believe the future is about social media, or instead building interactive experience offline is more important than ever? Thank you.
I mean, I'll say that everything that we do from a communications perspective, we're looking at it from every lens. So as Amanda was saying earlier, right, like our lives are multidimensional now, and from a brand perspective, you're trying to intercept that consumer when they wake up in the morning, as they're on their morning commute, as they're, reading the newspaper, as they're catching up on their social feeds, but also, in the alerts that pop up in their internet browsing, or when they're going to the grocery store, or whatever it is. So I think the importance of having an online presence and a really smart social strategy coupled with real life experiences is really important. But it's also important to look at those as a tight relationship between the two. It's not you have your online strategy here and your offline strategy there. It has to feel like part of one so that the experience is seamless and so that the consumer is getting different things from the different inputs, but it all feels like it's part of the same brand and part of the same offering.
Hi. So my name is Rafael. I recently graduated from Miami Ad School and currently looking for a job, so I have some questions. So thing is, like with recruiters who look at like 200 books a day, like how would you like stand out, let's say not necessarily with your book, but maybe with like personal projects, or I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Good question. I think the personal projects thing, I think is really cool. And it sounds like you have some going on, so that's amazing. But I think it's so hard when you're at ad school, right? Because your portfolio is like things that like have not yet happened or could happen, and they're kind of speculative to a certain extent. So actually finding something that you're passionate about and making it real, even on a small budget, and finding ways to get that out into the world is a really great way to demonstrate your passion for your creativity and your ability to like get stuff done. A good way to set yourself aside from other candidates. So like, I love the way that you're thinking about it that way. So if you can demonstrate you can get our attention on a personal project with almost no budget, then great. I mean, you've done half the job. We've done a half bit of the job already. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ina. I'm a graduate student at Burr College. I'm pursuing a master's degree in corporate communication. Over there, also gained my bachelor's in corporate communication. And before all that, I graduated from the music conservatory in Russia. So I have two passions. I'm very passionate about music. I'm very passionate about communication in the communication industry. And right now, for my thesis, I'm thinking about how I can combine all of my interests into one. So I'm curious about how companies choose what kind of music should represent their message in commercials, in advertising. So because all the commercials that we saw today, all of them had some sort of background, some sort of sound effects, music. And I do believe that we as the consumers really are impacted by the music in the commercials. And it's some products stay in our minds because of the music in those commercials. So I'm curious about what kind of positions in the industry are available for those who actually understand the music, and who, in your experience, when you do create those and when you craft those commercials, who is responsible for what kind of music and sound effects should be included in that commercial?
Yeah, so like, it's not, within the world of advertising agencies, it's not its own job. So it's part of the creative team who'll concept the overall campaign, will pick the music, and they tend to pick it by like what's cool or what they think is cool. So there's not a lot of science that goes into it. But if you have a deep specialism in music and you want to apply that to advertising, I'd be looking at production companies or music houses. And sometimes a production company will recommend a track, or a music house will be asked to compose an original track to work on a specific piece of advertising, but it tends not to be its own job in its own right. It tends to be part of a broader creative role.
And if you're in film and TV, and I'm sure you're familiar, there's music supervisor roles, which are, and those roles are where, kind of what you said, where you're really curating, okay, what piece of music could go into this part of the television show, whether it's a scripted show or an unscripted show. I work in documentary. I'm happen to be doing a Netflix series about women in hip hop. So the music supervisor is a very important role, like somebody who really understands that part and history of that genre and knows, oh, you should use this track, or this is going to make this person feel this way, or use that. So that, I would say, is probably more defined in a film and TV side than the ad side. And if you are more on the ad side, then possibly thinking about, the actual music providers, like those who create music for advertising.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the Super Bowl commercials that went viral. All of them had music, and what's the process behind that? So, okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
What does really advertising has to offer to the well-being of the world? Do we really need advertising?
That's a good question.
Oh, boy.
Wow, existential question.
You said we're done. What time? We're done?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Do we need advertising?
Thank you.
You can't have capitalism really without marketing. So, I mean, you're asking a question about like the economic system that you choose to live within. So if you accept there is capitalism, then there's a consumer society, and then consumers, to some extent, need something to guide them to what products to buy, and companies need a way to draw attention to their products. So it's as good as advertising is as good for society as capitalism is. So there we go. Philosophical answer to your philosophical question.
It's a good question.
I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I think the interesting question too now around advertising is how it's changed too, is that it's so inside of every experience that we have. And I think that's why there's this sort of feeling of like, gosh, everything that I do is being recorded, my data is being recorded, and then I'm being served whatever it might be in every internet search that I make or every place that I go. And in some cases that's great, right? Because you're being targeted in a way and you're actually being presented with opportunities and things that are relevant to you. But then, as we know, what's the limit to that, right? So at what point are you like, I don't love the fact that Spotify knows that I listen to this track when I'm standing still and I listen to this track when I'm running. I was, at a conference actually, which was very funny, where I went from one sort of breakout about privacy and security and surveillance, and then I went to this other breakout with like, somebody from Spotify talking about, and we know when you're listening to this track because we can track it from the movement of your phone. And it's like, oh my gosh, like these two people are coming from totally different points of view and thoughts. So I think we all sort of find how we feel about that.
I think
philosophically.
Also just beyond the capitalism and the marketing side of it, to me, what I love about this industry is the storytelling and the impact and the exposure to different life's issues, perspectives. And I think a lot of brands and companies are becoming really smart on how to tell that story in a really meaningful way that, through advertising, you're able to push certain issues, right? Whether it's executed well or not. There's just a different social conscious about it. So as I had said earlier, like being curious is something that I feel very strongly about. And so to have advertising and marketing and communications and the stories, I think it just opens your eyes to a different lens and to a different way of life.
And in the world that we live in now, like there's the bad side, but advertising is also, like I said, rising in terms of improving our consciousness and understanding of one another.
Yeah.
You know, we don't all look like a Victoria's Secret model. There is a space for a Third Love. There's a space for a Fenty, and these kinds of things are important because we're seeing greater representation inside of all of that as well. So there are forces for good inside of that too. But you know, like anything, we have to parse through it.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Last question. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Hasib from FIT2 Advertising Junior. My question is like, what's your experience like advertising in other countries?
Mm-hmm.
And like, is it like a visible language or like cultural gap? And like what are the few examples you can give me like how to market in other country and like what are the outcomes of those campaign?
Mm-hmm. Anybody?
It's a big question, isn't it? I mean, there's huge cultural differences.
Yeah.
Not just
Yeah.
in terms of the people that you're speaking to, but also just in terms of like the marketing and advertising cultures, in terms of the way people are like trained to receive messages. So, of course there is, but then there are still global campaigns, right? So how do you square that circle? If you're working on that global level, what you're actually looking for is for like the deeper human truth that is like more true to the human existence everywhere you are. And if you go deep enough, you can find those things, right? And perhaps in the way it's executed, you need to pay attention to local cultures and customs and, of course, like how the work itself shows up and who's in it and all that kind of stuff. But you can do it. So I used to work on acts or links. There's some pretty deep human truths about how people feel about the opposite sex, which are kind of true everywhere if you go deep enough. So that's.
Is there like any example you guys have done anything outside the country, like global, anything?
Yeah, quite a lot of campaigns you'll see are global.
Like anything you worked with?
Yeah, so Axe, the brand I just mentioned, we do. We've recently relaunched a brand for Smirnoff vodka that's gone global. So a few other things, but yeah, it's a fascinating topic because you're like, it's a fun thing to do as well because you're flying all around the world doing research groups, asking people how they feel about vodka, which is like a fun way to earn a living.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This was great. Really appreciate you being here, and thank you to all of you.